And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That is Cooper Petagna hanging out with us here on a Wednesday. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where we've got questions for Coop. Yeah, we're going to be asking about some of the biggest transfer portal headlines. We're talking the best fits. We're talking the players that you need to know, teams that did a good job of addressing their needs, and so much more. Before we do that, a little bit, we don't need to roll the sounder here, but Danny obviously was on the field. Coop, we haven't gotten a chance to hear you as well. So almost like a miniature upon further review. DK, you were there. You got a chance to talk to. I saw the Elijah Surratt interview was a lot of fun. Get to talk to some of the players. Takeaways from Monday night's national championship game.
It was incredible. Shout out to Kirk Cignetti, the best coach in the game. In tribute of him, I'm wearing the quarter zip with no shirt underneath. I must say, feels kind of good. I don't know, like slipping around in here. But that's what I just need, like the little coach's pen on a necklace underneath this. So I wore that in honor of him. It was the most electric national championship game I've been to. Like pregame, an hour before the game. An hour before. I looked at my watch, 6:30. Celebrities all over the place on the sideline. Most of the Miami royalty there. But the stands were 98% full. I mean, it was a stadium was full of people rocking in anticipation. And I thought the game delivered as well. It was incredible. It was awesome.
Awesome. What'd you think?
It was I would say the clash of styles just coming off the game that Miami played against Ole Miss with the penalties. And I just wondered, Bud, I heard you talking about it with block punt. I felt like Miami needed to be perfect, and it was just like one or two plays here or there. That's a different outcome in that game. And that's not to take anything against Indiana. I mean, the way that they've been rolling, that was the type of game that I was hoping to see, with Miami being able to have an opportunity to go ahead, take the lead there with less than a minute left. It was awesome. And just storybook for Indiana, everything that they've been through, and, to put the cherry on top of a season where I still think even people going into that national championship game not had some questions, but it was almost kind of like, oh, what a great story, right? And it went from a story to, these guys just went 16-0, beat Oregon twice. This is a team that I think is one of the best teams that we've seen in the college football playoff era.
One thing on rewatch, I thought Mendoza did a great job of ball security. Like they had 4 or 5 clean swats at him, and he didn't fumble a single time. Like that's like, especially some of those front side shots where he's like trying to dodge multiple dudes. Like that's where he gets some of those fumbles, and it's kind of an underrated thing. Well, like Indiana's margins were kind of slim too because they were so limited in what they could do from a play calling. Like they had to RPO it, what they call it, 40 RPOs in the game. I mean, just because you really couldn't do any kind of traditional drop back stuff, and his ball handling was really good.
It makes sense that they didn't have a fumble since week 1 on the entire season. That's insanity. They have not lost a fumble since week 1 of the season. It's like in a 12-game stretch, it hasn't been done since 2004.
Hacking cannot do ball security. I don't care if you can hack into the cloud systems or whatever, but that don't change your ball security. Like that is something that they've obviously prioritized in a very big way. Danny, we mentioned on Saturday night, Miami might have been built as one of the best teams to beat Indiana. Would you agree with that notion?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a little bit surprised at how well Indiana handled Miami's offensive line. The defensive line I thought did their job. I thought they did harass Fernando Mendoza. His final stat line wasn't fantastic, but I thought Hemby and Black ran really hard. I was kind of surprised at that. As somebody who picked Miami to win, I thought those would be the differences in the game. The other thing, I haven't had a chance to listen back to the instant reaction pod, but I did think Mario should have gone for it on the 4th down and 2 before halftime. It's a long field goal. I know you want to try to get away points, and I just wondered if that was more conservative Mario coming back to the forefront. I thought they could have gone for it, either giving him a closer field goal or taking a shot at the end zone. and really been a little bit more aggressive. But I don't think that was the reason they lost. But at halftime, it really felt like the game was slipping away. So whatever Mario said at halftime, you have to give him a ton of credit. That team came out enthusiastic in the second half, and they get Lucas back. Maybe that was one thing that infused a lot of life in them. But that was the only thing. And then the personal pump protector just flapping a wing out there like it's scout team, like you're wearing a little, like, hey, we're going.
Mikhail Kamara, the monster.
That's one that he's going to have a long time to have to live with it. I mean, everyone's going to talk about Carson Beck and the interception, but that's a tough pill to swallow if you let that guy just – it wasn't even like you got run over. You can excuse that, and guys are like, yeah, we get it. But if you just put out an arm and kind of just give it the old, like – That's a tough one to swallow for the rest of your life. That's brutal.
I do think Mario has gotten better at some of this game management stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like against Ohio State, it was pretty clean, right? Against Ole Miss, I think it was good. We talked about like the timeout mismanagement in the first half against A&M, which almost bit them in the ass. I do think like this will be teach tape because they got bailed out big time with Indiana's false start there. Second one with a minute 39 left and one timeout should be an automatic jump off sides intentionally. Like that's a big leak not to do that there. And like they weren't doing it. Like, I mean, the clock was winding down. Like, are you guys really not going to jump off sides here and make contact to give them the automatic first down? That way they really can't run out the clock. Second one, the odds that they run it out on you are extremely high.
So the offsides stops the clock.
Well, it gives them a new first down, so you don't get like essentially if you get two shots or even three, really, because they're probably going to go on 4th and 1, right? To convert that, the new set of downs when you add in like the time that runs off with the additional play, then you're at like a minute 30 with no timeouts. That's knee ball game, right? So I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but you have to jump off sides there.
Interesting. Coop, didn't you work for Mario?
I did. Yeah.
Like give us, I mean, as somebody who did, like take us through what you have seen in terms of, because one of the things that I know that I've been sort of wrestling with is, ranking coaches is a very, very difficult and like a losing proposition, right? But last year, Marcus Freeman, the way that I felt about where he stood on my coach ranking ballot at the beginning of the season to where it stood at the end of the season, that changed. That playoff run really changed the way that I saw him ranked against his peers. And Mario, the way that he rallied this team from the SMU loss and had them in the right like headspace, I think that's important coaching. But I'm way on the outside in terms of experience on this. What have you seen in terms of Mario Cristobal and sort of his coaching arc over the course of this season?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not shocked that they made this deep playoff run. I thought they'd get past Texas A&M, and the reason for that was when we were at Oregon, and really, if you've been following Mario throughout his career, I felt more comfortable in the big time games than I did going up against Cal or Oregon State out on the West Coast. And I always felt like Mario was really good getting the team up in terms of playing the underdog role. So when you have this team that gets into the playoffs, needed some help, they're a 10 seed, and then they have this road of treachery between Texas A&M, Ohio State. They got to run the table. Ole Miss playing three of the hottest teams in college football. I knew from a personnel standpoint they had what it took to get to where they got in the national championship. And I think he just leaned into his DNA. He said, I'm going to ride my horses, and my horses are Francis Malinois, Markel Bell on the offensive line. I'm going to ride Bain and Messidor in this front seven, and they spent a lot of money in the offseason on the back end. And I think he coaches looser when he knows everybody's discounting his team and his program, and he feels confident in his personnel. I think it's a little bit different when you see those games against Louisville or SMU and you pencil them in, not with Sharpie, but you say, hey, this is a game these guys should win. My personal opinion, I think that's where Mario gets a little bit tight. And we talk about it all the time. These teams, they emulate their head coach. So when he can go out there and be free and be himself and say, nobody's giving us a chance, that's when you get the best version of Miami. And I think we've seen that. Danny mentioned it coming out of half and what they're about and getting that quick 3 and out. And that really kind of, I think swung the momentum on Miami's favor, especially in the second half. But it says a lot about his culture, his DNA, what he's about. And the thing about both of these teams, which I enjoyed, was just the juggernaut matchup in the trenches. Indiana doesn't give you an inch. I mean, these are the guys that just execute in unison. And then Miami, between Bain and Mesidor, two guys that have shown they're capable of taking over and flipping games throughout the season. That's what Miami wants to be about. That's what Mario wants to be about. And I'll say this, Mario is always about talent. He's always about talent. And I think for the first time in his career, he's got two guys in Heatherman and Shannon Dawson that he believes in, that he can be hands off and just go and maximize it. And he's going to worry about the rest, which, to Bud's point, can I clean up clock management, be the CEO, and culturally get these guys buy into my message? And I think you saw the best part of Mario's coaching job throughout his career over the last couple of weeks.
Can I screen share real quick? Because the stuff from Huddle IQ with Beck's pass plays, I think is pretty interesting. Here, check this out. Can you guys see this? Or if Mikey can put that on screen. So, like, we were talking about like how they really never got them out of that two deep look. We're never really able to like hit them on the play action stuff. So purple here, if I can zoom in on this a little more. Is that zoomed in a little more for people back? Anyway, you guys can see this for the most part. Like, purple's incomplete, red is an interception, light green is completed. I mean, if you're listening at home, like, they didn't complete a single ball more than 20 yards between the hashes. I do kind of wonder if the tight end not being in there for them, what's his name? The guy who got hurt against Ole Miss.
Elijah Lofton.
Yeah, I wonder if that hurt them more than we talked about, both in pre and post game. But also, like, Indiana, they tackled so well, I think, because they never really were able to threaten them over the top, or really outside the numbers very much. Honestly, like, one of those two balls that went for more than 15 was the crazy scramble. I think you only had one pass completed for more than 15 yards in the air, like inside of structure. So, Indiana's keeping everything in front of them. Man, whatever they had, like, to figure out if it was play action or not, they were on that, because like they never got caught on that. It was even when Miami went pistol, like the more downhill looks, they just never bit. It was wild, and I think that allows you to tackle well if you got all those guys with eyes on the ball.
I mean, I think they also just tackle well.
Oh, yeah.
They are the 16-0 national champions. They've done a pretty good job about it throughout the whole season. It's that was remarkable. There were so many plays where it just felt like if Malachi Toney could get his shoe loose, it was going to be 40 yards extra on top of like what he had gotten. But Indiana did a good job of wrapping up. Just awesome stuff. Danny, Star Watch, I saw we had a DJ Khaled interview.
DJ Khaled, Fat Joe, Mark Cuban.
Let's go.
Tom Brady was there. Noah, our producer. You guys know Noah. He was just scrambling to get everybody, just pulling him in mid-interview. For Tom Brady was trying to get him, couldn't get it. He was trying to get Ed Reed, couldn't get it. He was trying to get Michael Irvin, but he got snatched up by Stephen A. Smith. Like, it was everybody who's anybody was there, especially from the Miami contingent. That was the one thing before the game. It's like, I know Indiana had the heavier fan base and the more participation, but the star power was Miami centric down there. Being a home game, being all the locals that came out, it was pretty cool. It was definitely had that place to be sort of vibe. I did say to DJ Khaled, I was like, Miami's always been the place for, the place of entertainment. The Hurricanes have always been cool, whether it was going back to Luther Campbell. And he's like, shout out my guy, Luke. And I was like, or Vanilla Ice. And it was just kind of crickets. It was like, that was not embraced as much as Uncle Luke. I was like, But I remember, I thought Vanilla Ice was one of the first ones to wear the Miami gear in his Ice Ice Baby. But he didn't appreciate he didn't give him quite as much a shout out. But everybody was super cool. Everybody was super friendly.
Oh, you don't understand. Theirs is like ding, 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 ding. Mine's like ding, ding, ding. Danny, story time. You got a little story you want to share with the people?
So,
you teased this, and so I'm frothing. I'm excited to hear.
So, you guys know, like, we all like to put a little something on the game every once in a while. I like to partake a little bit somewhat. I was pretty heavy on the Miami Hurricanes. Thought they had a chance to win. I give it out here. So a week ago, I usually do dinner with my parents on Sunday nights. And my dad comes up. We're talking about the game at the table. And he's like, what's the spread? I'm like, 7.5. And he's like, man, I think Miami can win. I'm like, me too. I'm like, Dad, we're on the same page. So he pulls me over after dinner. He goes, "Don't tell your mom this." He goes, "Don't tell anybody."
You're an adult.
I know. That's how things work in our family. And I do the same thing with my wife.
Yeah.
Some things are better left unsaid. So he goes, "I got $1,000. I want you to put it on Miami." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Is he like, this is my first bet. He's never bet anywhere." I was like, "Yes." I'm like, "I'll match it." I'm like, "I'm in with you." And he's like, "All right." So I call him and he's like, "I'll fire, put in the bet for him." And then on Tuesday, I'm like, "Dad," I'm like, and I told him, I was like, he's like, "What do I get if we win?" And I said, "Well, it's plus 250 right now. So you get $2,500 if it wins." He goes, "Whoa." He goes, "Really?" He goes, "Oh man." So I call him on like Tuesday and he's checking. And I was like, "Dad, it's up to 8.5." He's like, "Oh man." He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, the money line is now up to plus 270. So if you had 1,000, you'd get 2,700. It's an extra $200. So I'm like, "But it's not that big a deal." I'm like, plus 12, like, we're still good. And he's like, all right. So he's watching the game, and of course it goes down. And I'm like, oh man, my dad's going to be so out on gambling now. So I call him yesterday, and he goes, "Do you have my money ready for me?" And I'm like, "Well, we lost." And he goes, "Well, we had 7.5 points." He's like, "I thought we had 7.5 points." And I was like, "Oh no." I said, "Dad," I didn't understand. There was a little miscommunication because I thought he said, "I think Miami's going to win." He didn't say Miami's going to cover. So I said, "Dad," I said, any good sports book?" I said, "If that, as your bookie," I said, "I feel like you get a free bet on this first one." He's like, "Nah." He said, but he thought he won. I was so bummed. I was like, "No." I said, "No, I want him this first experience to be good." I mean, maybe we saved him from losing everything and becoming a degenerate. Like if he won that bet, maybe he would have just said, "Well, keep it on the Rams to win the Super Bowl." I don't know. But at this case, I think that's probably his first and only bet that he'll ever make, especially since it went down like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you hit up FanDuel Sportsbook, play your game, and you're like, "Oh, I made a mistake," they don't refund it.
Sure they would. Sure they would. So yeah, he was on the right side, but he wasn't. I was like, "Dad," I was like, "How did you think you were going to make $2,500 off 1,000?" He's like, "I don't know. I thought we were going to win." It's like,
oh my God.
Hey, listen.
Now he owes me 1,000 because I floated it for him. So what do I do? Do I go back?
Like, no. You got no. You got to eat that.
I'm fully prepared to eat it. I'll eat it. I feel like
you can eat it. Okay, yeah. I love that. Dr. Kanell.
It's awesome.
I know he always tracks your picks. Now the question is,
he does. And he watched our top 25 show where we were 20 games over 500. So he's thinking these guys give nothing but winners. And we were. We just got to teach him what a money line is.
He's going to be like, "Don't tell your mother." But I tried to use the credit card to deposit. Now everything's locked. Man. All right, good stuff. All right, well, obviously Cooper Petagna is here, and he's just a college football expert, but also he has really been digging into the transfer portal, and that is one thing that we are excited to break down with him. So coming up on the other side, we go into the transfer portal, starting with maybe a little billable hours too. All that and more next.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Yes, the transfer portal has officially closed in terms of entering your name. So we've got some big storylines, but other notes to get to. And well, so Mikey, can we go into the portal? All right, so obviously one of the big headlines on the last day that you could enter your name into the transfer portal was that Duke quarterback Darian Mensah, who helped the Blue Devils win the ACC championship this year. Initially there was some thought he might go pro. He decides he's going to come back. He signed a 2-year deal prior to arriving in Durham, and now he would like to play somewhere else. Coop, from the sort of like inside the industry side of this, what is the discussion around the Darian Mensah saga?
So I was, sorry, go ahead, Coop. My bad.
Well, yeah, no, but I'm interested to get your take on it too. I think teams are watching it carefully, but I think there's like an expected outcome here that Darian Mensah obviously is going to be able to enter his name into the portal. And we saw that relatively quickly with a judge in North Carolina denying Duke's request or restraining order. I don't want to get into the legal side, but you could probably add some context into that. But obviously a lot of teams watching it for Duke. I mean, it's tough, man. This guy, as you alluded to, signed a 2-year deal, $8 million, 4 years per, and is now entering the transfer portal a year after you won the ACC championship. And for Manny Diaz, I mean, this is a guy you're hitching your wagon to. You pluck him from Tulane, and on the 14th day of a 2-week portal window, the last day he enters the portal and is more than likely going to join a team that is in your conference and just play for a national championship. And then on top of this, he's out the door, and the market for Duke at the quarterback position it's completely bare, quite honestly, just in terms of finding a quarterback that is like a winnable plus quarterback, an above average starter in that conference is going to be really difficult for Manny Diaz. And that's coming off a banner year where Duke is expected to take the next step, and Darian Mensah obviously going to be a huge piece of that. So I think teams are obviously looking at the Mensah situation, the Damon Williams situation, the way that these contracts are written and how enforceable they actually are. But, for Miami, where he'll more than likely be going, it's an 11th hour bailout. And for Duke, it puts him in an absolutely dire situation going forward.
Bud, what's the billable hours legal read on this? Because the way that I understood first of all, on the just entertainment side, the fact that a judge had to recuse himself because he's a Duke men's basketball season ticket holder. I mean, just wow, the odds of a judge in Durham County either doing undergrad or law school at Duke is very, very high. So we were already dealing with shooting fish in a barrel with that one. But I believe the contract had him still at Duke University through December 31st, 2026. Now, obviously, they're trying to undo all of that. What are the arguments and what's your read here?
So if you read this and you look at the contract with Mensah, it makes sense why their restraining order got denied. They can't keep him from the portal. The way I read it, and of course we'll see how this plays out, is that they're likely going to be entitled to get the $4 million back for Mensah because that is the amount that they basically said they think his NIL is worth. So I don't see how he gets out of it without reimbursing Duke for $4 million. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else they're going to be able to recover here. The alleged tampering stuff inside the ACC with another ACC school is a really interesting question for the conference. It probably not something.
Yeah, like spring meetings. This is going to be like very much like one of the topics that goes down. Yeah,
exactly right. It makes you wonder, like, how would not Sankey, but like how would a Mike Slive handle this? A decade ago, right? But I don't know what the ACC is really going to do about that. I think Duke will get their $4 million. They're not able to prevent him from going to the portal, at least based on my read of this. I did see somebody, and I want to credit them, and I just totally forgot who it was on Twitter, but basically said, like, hey, if Miami pays him 6 and the 4 to cover Duke, like he has to pay the tax bill on 10, right? Which is not fun, clearly. So I think Duke will get their $4 million. Obviously, like, they'd rather have Mensah than $4 million, given what's available in the portal, as Coop just talked about. But I think that's probably pretty clean on it. But we'll see how this plays out.
I talked to Michael McCann. You know Michael McCann with Sportico?
Yeah.
He's like a law professor. Was asking him just about it. He kind of was in agreement. The one thing that I've read and was kind of asking him about was his NIL rights. Like, does Duke have to, like, they might own those, and that could prevent him from making money off his name, image, and likeness as a Miami Hurricane. Is that a possibility of where they could hold this up? And then if you're Miami, you're like, fine, who cares? We'll just pay him. We don't need, like, but it
pay him out a rev share,
But it could make things complicated because the rev share, it's going to take up a lot of money from there. Like, I don't know. Have you seen that, Bud? Do you think that's an issue at all?
So, like with the Williams piece, that is clearly an issue that kept him at Washington, right? Because if LSU had poached him, that $4 million would have come off LSU's cap number for the following year, right? So let's assume that LSU let's just call it. I know they don't spend 20 in rev share on football, but let's just say they do, just to keep the math clean, right? So their cap would have been knocked down to effectively 16 because the $4 million that LSU would have owed Washington under the House settlement, because the money was a rev share offset, right? They would have been down to 16, which would have made it untenable for LSU. Like, certainly they could probably find a way to get around that with NIL or other measures, but it is a pain in the ass to do that, and it kind of handcuffs you a little bit for the following year. This looks like NIL, so I'm not really sure that this will actually come off Miami's cap. As far as like Duke being entitled to whatever he makes at Miami, they seem to like pretty well stipulate in here that his NIL is worth about $4 million. So I'm not sure that a judge is going to be like, yeah, well, Miami paid him more, so it's actually worth a lot more than y'all already stipulated to, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's somewhat clean, but we'll see. Like there could be some twists and turns in this.
Well, Darian Mensah obviously was one of the top quarterbacks before he arrived at Duke, and then he is, as Coop mentioned, just a bailout because Miami, looking at what was available in the transfer portal, it was going to be very difficult to replicate anything close to the success of 2025 without getting better at the most important position. The billable hours remain undefeated. Court cases, we'll trade them back and forth, but yeah, it does seem as though we know our end result. We just don't know how we're going to get there. But speaking of quarterbacks, Cooper, how did the quarterback dominoes fall from your seat? What was really interesting to you about the different players, where they landed, and sort of how all one impacted another?
Well, I think you had the two at the top that were very clear. There was Levitt, and then there was Sorsby. And we have Levitt ranked number 1 and Sorsby right there at number 2. I think you could have gone either way. I think that was a total kind of flavor pick. But the two teams that were obviously attached to Sorsby, who, as Chris Hummer put it, controlled the market. He was the first domino in the transfer portal that everybody was waiting for to drop. Sorsby was a pretty interesting cat just in terms of what he brings to the table. His upside, I think he'd probably be a guy that very confidently would go in early day two of the NFL draft if he were to come out just with his skill set. But once Sorsby comes off the board, LSU needed a quarterback. You still had a big question mark at Oregon before Dante Moore made a decision. And then you had Oregon as well. And then there was Tennessee. You're still trying to figure out kind of what they're doing. Are they going to roll forward with George McIntyre and Faison Brandon? Or are they going to bring in another veteran arm like they did last year with Joey Aguilar? And then with Ty Simpson declaring for the NFL draft and sticking, that kind of it made this interesting from the fact that you're like, all right, one of these blue bloods is going to be left without one of those major options, right? And the way that it played out, obviously Sorsby going to Tech, I think there was one point where Miami felt pretty confident that they were going to get Sam Levitt, and then a day later he ended up in Baton Rouge. Because if you remember the way that this played out, the day that the Damon Williams news came out that he was entering the transfer portal, Sam Levitt was sitting courtside at a women's basketball game with Lane Kiffin. And then he leaves, takes a visit to Tennessee, and then goes to Miami. And it all kind of gets wonky. And then Damon goes back to Seattle. So, yeah, the way that it played out, to me, LSU was the most desperate team. They absolutely had to have one of these top guys, whether it was Sorsby or whether it was Levitt. They obviously got it done with him. And then they end up getting Longstreet. I think Raiola is kind of the guy that gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. And here's what I think about a Raiola. Okay. You can think whatever you want on the player. I think the way people feel about the person, they kind of get that a little bit confused with what the player's been able to do through his first 2 years. And I get it. It hasn't been exponential production, but this is a guy that if you put in the right ecosystem and environment, I think he can excel. So yeah, a lot of moving parts. And quite honestly, I didn't know what Miami was going to be able to do and what rabbit that they were going to be able to pull out of the hat, but they were able to successfully do that with Darian Mensah. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the guys that are playing quarterback roulette, I mean, it's a dangerous game, but all the contenders were able to really kind of land safely.
Well, last thing on the Mensah piece, the $4 million I think is what Mensah's damages to Duke might be. I'm not sure that precludes Duke from pursuing like a tortious interference thing against Miami or anybody associated with Miami.
What is up? I don't
like
know.
like suing Miami or its associates for interfering.
But that would not prevent Darian Mensah from wearing the Miami uniform for the 2026
Correct, but the check that they might get off that might be bigger than just the $4 million.
It's Duke. Win. Money's not real. It's
Yeah,
Duke and Miami. You were talking about private schools. Money's not real. Danny, what'd you make of the quarterback dominoes?
I don't know. I didn't think there was one that I fell in love with this year. I mean, but last year everyone loved Mateer, and it didn't work out that great for Oklahoma. Like I thought I loved Cam Ward. I thought he delivered. I think they all come with red flags. I think it kind of comes back to I like Mensah maybe better than a lot of these guys that are ranked ahead of him. I think he's really talented, and you've seen 2 good years of play, both at Tulane and Duke. And those, especially at Duke, I mean, I know the season didn't unfold the way because of losses, but he was pretty good. Sorsby kind of dropped off a little bit towards the end of the season when the competition got better. He, struggled a little bit more against the top-tier competition. Sam Levitt's coming off of surgery. His play tapered off a little bit this year. But on all these programs they're going to, they're probably going to have better surrounding talent than they had at some of these places. So I think it's, like Bud said, if you look at the returns on investment from these schools that did go to the portal, and 4 of the semifinalists, all 4 of them had a transfer portal quarterback, it makes sense why you would go that route.
Do you guys think Miami and some of the schools like Miami might be onto something here as far as being willing to just pay like crazy for a proven commodity at quarterback and not throwing money at high schoolers? Like Emory Williams didn't get a bag. Obviously, like Coleman, I'm sure got something decent, the high school kid they signed. But like Miami has not really been doing the pay big money to high school quarterbacks thing, And I just wonder if it makes sense at that position to just like pay the premium to get the certainty.
I think the answer to that question has everything to do with the timeline of your program. Once you establish the standard of what people expect year in and year out, then obviously it's going to be a little bit of a different game. You look at Texas Tech, furthest they've ever been in the college football playoff era. That's what people expect now, right? So they go out and they get Sorsby. You look at LSU in Lane Kiffin. Is he going to tie himself to a young quarterback that really hadn't played a lot? I mean, Austin Simmons got injured, and then the pivot to Trinidad Chambliss, and they never looked back, right? That's the expectation, that he's going to be attached to one of the most pro-ready type of players in the country. You look at Miami, it suits Miami. And listen, I love Mario Cristobal. You go back all the way back to his days at Oregon in terms of quarterback development. It's the surefire guys that were ready. We had Tyler Shupp there, and we ended up going with the guy Anthony Brown, right, who had a cup of coffee in the league. So even Indiana, right, when it comes up with Alberto Mendoza, who's got some similarities to his brother, and it's like, yeah, we like him. He could be good. But when there's Josh Hoover sitting out there, we have a proven commodity that we could go with that meets our timeline of championship expectations. So I don't think there's a handful of teams that can do this. You look at Ole Miss and what they've been able to do. But even with Pete Golding, who's now a first-time head coach, he's got to go to a very young, talented, and inexperienced Deuce Knight, right? So I think what we saw with these teams out there, it's Oregon, it's LSU, it's Miami, now it's Indiana because of what Cignetti's done with Curtis Rourke and Fernando Mendoza in the last 2 years. There's about like 5 or 6 teams every year that can go out, pay above market value, and say, hey, we expect to contend for a national championship, and that starts with the quarterback position. And I think that's how you're going to see those guys kind of go. Like even, outside of like even the Bryce Underwoods of the world, I think teams would rather go with the proven commodity.
I was going to say, so what programs have the luxury of not needing to do that? What programs can sit back and try to rely on their own high school evaluation, development, and not necessarily face those same pressures?
I think the majority of them out there, right? I just named 5 or 6 that actually can do it. I think everybody else is kind of in that boat where they kind of have to play the bridge game. Hey, maybe we get a guy in here for a year. We like a guy like, Hassan Longstreet was a 5-star. He's sitting behind Jaden Maeva. The guy leaves after 1 year and he's going to go sit at LSU. These guys are not viewed the same. You almost have to be ready to play. I go back and I look at it that DJ Lagway played early. Underwood obviously played early. Raiola played early. You either have to have the physical makeup and the intangibles to be able to contribute early at those type of places, or you got to be ready to sit and develop and be able to take your lumps, if you want to call them that. And a guy like Julian Sayin, who knows that he's in the right place to develop. So yeah, I really only think it's a handful of programs, 5 or 6 around the country, that can go out and attract the biggest quarterback names in the portal. And everybody else has kind of got to figure out what they want to do, how they want to stagger it. Is there one guy that we can live with, bridge, why we have the other guy sitting for a year, right?
Mm.
Like Deuce Knight, sat for a year behind Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels, and then he's gone, poof, right? So, I only really think it's a handful of programs that are able to pull this off.
Is that like the Tennessee situation? You know that Faison Brandon's probably going to go out there and be your starter at some point, and you've just got to figure it out to try to keep the boat floating until then?
100%. Faison Brandon's probably not ready to play this year. And given what happened last year with Tennessee, it puts them in a really difficult position where they would have been probably best suited to go the Joey Aguilar route and go get a guy like Bo Prabula. And this is really kind of difficult for Tennessee, right? And kind of what does this look like? Because you're either going to have to play a guy in George McIntyre, which there was some mixed reviews on coming out of high school, or a guy like Faison Brandon who's not ready to play. And then you have a Tennessee fan base that's experienced a high level of success and they're ready to get back there. But over the last 2 years, one due to circumstance and the other one due to probably just not being aggressive enough in the portal, is going to leave you with 2 very inexperienced quarterbacks where the rest of the roster says you're 9-3, 10-2 team in the SEC. But the quarterback play development timeline doesn't match it.
That we have talked on this, it's 2-parter here. We've talked on this show that it seems to us like the offensive line is just not overflowing with talent in the transfer portal. There are too many teams that need to, it's like every message board says, okay, we'll just bolster our offensive line in the portal. Okay. Well, there's too many teams that need to bolster their offensive line than there are quality offensive linemen who can play at the highest levels of the sport right now. But one of them is Jordan Seaton. So what's your read on Jordan Seaton's outlook as he's, you've got the player evaluation on him, but he does certainly seem like one of the very few, one of the stars of this portal class that you can expect is going to be worth every penny.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing this is my 2nd year doing the portal, right? And the guy that we had last year ranked as the #1 offensive tackle was Isaiah World, who was a mixed bag, right? He had everything that you wanted. He played a lot of games in Nevada, but the question was, how is he going to hold up at Oregon? And obviously he has his warts that showed up against Indiana late in the playoffs. Jordan Seaton's a different breed. Okay. This is a guy that we had ranked as a 5-star coming out. We have him ranked as the #1 offensive tackle and as a 5-star in the transfer portal. He started 22 games in 2 years. He was as impact ready as any offensive tackle that we've had in the last couple of cycles outside of Proctor and Malinois. He's right up there in that conversation. So he is a plug and play, bona fide dude with a guy that absolutely has a 1st-round ceiling. And you're putting him at, one of the most premium positions in the game, right? Protecting those investments. And here are the teams attached to him. They're the same teams that were attached to the quarterbacks, right? It was Miami, it's Oregon, it's LSU. Those are the teams. Those are the 3 teams right now that are vying for it. And they're all trying to protect their guy. Miami with Mensah, LSU with Levitt, and Oregon with Dante Moore. Think about how much capital they have invested in those guys that they all see as potential day 1 or day 2 NFL draft picks, and they go as they go. So, and you look at Nussmeier last year for LSU, he has a young, inexperienced offensive line, Tyree Adams on the left tackle, at the left tackle spot. all the expectations going into that season. And because they couldn't run the ball and because they couldn't protect him, that thing just derails whatever expectation that you had. So that piece, not only the left tackle, but that offensive line, it's incredibly important, as simple as that sounds, to be able to piece it together. If you have one or two pieces left, he is absolutely worth the value of probably, I would imagine, Bud, you probably have a better feel on this, but I would imagine north of $3.5 million at this point.
I mean, it's just the market scarcity drives the price up. Like there aren't that many guys in the portal, like Coop said, that have that like upside plus proven production.
All right, so real quick, let me just add to that, because you guys know these names, right? Like the guy that we have ranked as the number 2 offensive tackle, Carius Kern, who had to play as a freshman at LSU. And guess what? Some of it was good. A lot of it was bad, right? The other guys behind him, the tackle from Wake Forest, that's going to Texas. Obviously, Texas, Steve Sarkisian, they're investing outside of Gooseby. And then behind that, Lance Hurd, who was a former 5-star, that's done some good things. He wants to play left tackle. He's probably a right tackle, right? So none of these guys, to Danny's point, even talking about the quarterback, none of these guys are perfect. And then after that, there's a steep drop off. So it's really trying to just maximize what I've seen teams doing is the value, especially LSU outside of Seton. It's like, let's get some big bodies with some power forward experience and some functional athleticism, and then we're really just going to have to scheme around it, right? Which is what Lane Kiffin's done at Ole Miss for the last handful of years. It's possible, but it's not ideal.
Before we hit another break and start to get into some of the team-centric stuff, Cooper, take us through some of the other names. If those of you who have not been following all the moving pieces, what are some of the other names that that fans need to know in terms of new faces, new places for the 2026 season?
Yeah, I think a guy that I want to talk about is Drew Messamaker. You know, he's sitting there at number 3, and a lot of people are like, oh, you know, you got the names at the top, you got Levitt, you got Sorsby. I love Drew Messamaker. I love everything he's about. He obviously kind of took his lumps this season, but he played exceptionally well, and I get it. It was at the group of 6 level. But Danny, you could probably – I'd love to get your opinion on this. But for a kid not to start one game in high school and to come out and have the year that he had, and then to see the type of advanced level passer that he is and the intangibles that he plays with, the pocket awareness, the ability to extend plays, the timing, the anticipation, the ball placement. It's like, whoa, you know, that guy is way ahead of schedule. So I love Drew Messamaker. I love everything he's about. I think he's the guy that kind of gets glossed over. But, you know, we saw it with Mateer and Arbuckle last year, what continuity can do for a system. Him staying with Eric Morris along with Caleb Hawkins, their running back, who had a great year, along with Wyatt Young, one of their young guys at the receiver position. Oklahoma State's done some really interesting things. And I'll say this, North Texas, included in the Power 4, is one of the best scouting operations, at least just from studying the guys that have jumped in the portal. There's Power 4 talent littered all over that roster from last year. They've done a tremendous job. So I expect Oklahoma State to really kind of bounce back a lot quicker than people think. And then one other guy that I want to give some love to is Amarian Miller, who's going to Arizona State. From Colorado, and this kid, you know, just really kind of put it all together, had over 700 yards receiving, 18 yards per reception. He's 6'3", he's 210 pounds, he's beautiful, he's smooth, he's sudden, and then you pair him with a guy like Reed Harris from Boston College, who is another big physical body. Those are two names to know, because Jordan Tyson's out of there, right? And Sam Levitt's out of there. Cutter Boley comes in. Arizona State has done some, you know, Dillingham's been screaming at the clouds, I need more money. I think he finally got some, and he's putting it to good use.
Was it John Rahm? Come on, John.
It might have been Rombo.
Might have been Rombo. Yeah. Danny, what do you make of Messamaker?
Love Messamaker. I mean, he was a buy on Day Trading Danny probably in late October when we saw him lighting it up there at North Texas. His story's been documented. It's pretty insane. I would say, like, I played at single A. I mean, Bud probably knows the high school I played at. I mean, I virtually had no experience. I mean, I was the tallest guy on the team, the biggest guy on the team. We played against we had 23 guys on my team. I do think this is one of those ones where it's about the potential, but you've already got this guy who stepped in right away, and you could just see a natural ability to throw the football. and he led the country in passing yards. Like, it's not like they're asking him to be a game manager. They were throwing it all over the yard. And just like you said, Cooper, I love the fact, and I think that's been a trend that we've seen is coaches following, quarterbacks following coaches to different places. So you have continuity in the system. He's already got a really good firm grasp of those concepts. So even though he hasn't played a ton, I would expect him to make a pretty smooth transition into the Big 12.
You mentioned the production. I wanted to ask before we flip the teams. If you look at the power ratings, like the national champion this year, which Indiana, obviously, like, it's tremendous what they did. Like 2020 Bama or 2019 LSU or those Georgia teams would be like well over a touchdown over them. I think according to a lot of it takes less talent to win the whole damn thing now than it used to. I mean, like the national champions 5 years ago, like that roster in the next 2 drafts was producing like 25, 27 draft picks. Like, Indiana's not going to have 25 draft picks this draft and next draft off the roster that won the national title. Like, does that make us lean in to production more and potential less if you don't need quite as much like freak talent to win the whole thing?
Are you talking about in terms of the portal rankings?
Well, I like portal rankings, but also like if you're a school, right? You don't necessarily need to shoot the moon quite as much.
Signetti's talked about that. Like, I want guys that have gone out and played and gotten yards and tackles. I mean, they've prioritized production with their transfer portal pickups.
I think he even said production over potential.
Yeah.
I think he's used that phrase.
Cuban talked about that. That's what he pitched him on, because Cuban didn't like the speculative nature of some of this stuff. Like, there's a speculative nature as far as like how do they fit what we do, right? And finding market efficiencies. I'm just wondering, like, if you're a team, are you a little bit less concerned with building the super team now, just because it takes less talent to win it?
If you watch the Indiana-Oregon game, I almost feel like it kind of shows up on tape. Like in Indiana, to me, is going to take like an entire offseason of just picking them apart and kind of figuring out, all right, like how did this all come together in unison? And everybody deserves credit, from talent identification, evaluation, schematic fit, from the cerebral and tangible part. Like, that's the most connected team I've ever witnessed, I've ever watched play. Like, they just move in unison every time you watch them. Every single unit, every single one of those guys feels like you have a coach on the field. There's no missteps. There's no wasted motion. They all play fast. And that's what's interesting about them. And I go back to the Indiana-Oregon, because you look at Oregon, they're the definition of how you would put a team together from a height, weight, speed standpoint. They are the potential team. There's everything you want, right? You got everything on the lengthy corners on the outside, the instinctive safeties, the backers are obviously guys that have played a lot of football.
Isaiah World,
the
out there.
Defensive front, right? But Indiana is a team that's just, to me, to Bud's point, like they don't give you anything. They suffocate you with execution and technique. They're incredibly well coached, and they put all that out there. My question is, outside of Signetti, who is the only example of us seeing this, is it a little dangerous to think that this can just be replicated like that?
Totally.
Right. And I'm going to find that interesting, because what I think is going to happen, it's a copycat league, and you're going to see the pendulum swing a little bit, and people are going to say, oh, look at what Indiana did. We can rely more on production, which I think there's obviously a case there for that. But to be able to do what Indiana has done, this is one of the best coaching jobs I think I've ever seen. And obviously I'm younger in my football career, but to think that this is something that can just be ripped off and done by anybody, I think I'd be a little bit cautious to that. But I can see an injection of thinking of like, hey, we don't need, not everything needs to be a traits play, right? Like, just get on base, hit the single, hit the double, know where we can find value, both financially, from a team standpoint, from a depth standpoint. Let's build this thing out 1 to 105. And let's make sure every single one of these guys kind of has a redeeming quality and a vision for their role.
It's also been the one thing too, Bud, that's bucked the blue chip ratio. And you've said this all the time. There's been an outlier quarterback. And so they still did have that. That was pretty special.
The number one overall pick in the draft.
Right. Like, he's got like, yeah, if you want to build a bunch of, average Joes and really good veteran guys, you better hope you have a player like that. I think that clearly was a big reason why Indiana had the success. Doesn't take away from what Indiana's built, but it also helped to have Mendoza back there playing as well as he did.
But in terms of a reflection of where we are at in college sports, I'll give a point to the passer, to Isaac Trotter, one of our great college basketball writers. He pointed out that, sort of if you were to look at the 2020, this past season, the Florida Gators just won a men's basketball national championship without a top 100 prospect on the roster. That 3-guard lineup were all transfer portal additions, and they had some bigs that were in-house guys, but not the tippy top guys that Florida had to fight Duke and Kentucky over. Then you pair that up with Indiana winning a national championship without any 5-stars. And Isaac's takeaway was identification, evaluation, and development. And development to me is not only helping a player get to their highest peak potential, but also getting them all to buy into each other for the no wasted motion, for all moving together, to being connected. So it is an important time right now. You can't just load up the roster with all the traits and roll the balls out there, because that's going to get you an 8-4 season is kind of what it feels like. If you want to win championships right now and be able to succeed at the highest level, you've got to be able to have the right pieces and be able to get them all on the same page.
Chip, real quick, I think the last thing on Indiana, all the timelines for all of these guys and major players. I mean, you go Elijah Surratt, you talk about Mendoza, you talk about Pat Coogan, D'Angelo Pons. All these guys are in the same timeline. They're all veteran players, right? When you talk about the guys at Oregon, World, Pregnon, all those guys would be going out. But Dante Moore was a guy that's really kind of a first-year starter coming off of a tough season as a freshman at UCLA. There's mixing parts of it that I think that's important. Like, that experience has to gel together in terms of the timeline. And I think Indiana got that part right. Like, these were the guys, not only are they all cohesive on both sides of the ball, but they're at the peak of their development. And that's what they got right as well. And I don't know how intentional that was. I mean, they get credit for it, but it obviously worked out. And that's obviously a big takeaway from a roster construction standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Black, Pons, Kamara,
Himby.
7 guys that were all part of the JMU 11-2 team that made the jump to the FBS a couple years ago. So their connectiveness, obviously, and especially with the JMU coaches, was well established. Coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to some of the teams that made waves and your questions. Next.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Ready or not, here I come. Let's go! Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. All right, Coop, who impressed you, right? I mean, you're always being asked to, analyze the big picture, the players, but then also the teams as well. Who made moves that caught your attention?
Well, we should probably just stick with it, right? Because we've been talking about Indiana. Indiana is one of those teams, and this is kind of the funny point, right? We talked about the guys that they brought over from JMU, and this goes back to the quarterback conversation. With now your brand is elevated, so it gets you into a different conversation, right? And that's where Indiana is right now. Quarterback with Josh Hoover, who they were able to take. You think about Nick Marsh on the outside, who they were able to bring in as well. Toby Osunsomni, the pass rusher from Kansas State, who I think's got a really big upside. Joe Brunner, they bring over from Wisconsin, an all-conference guy over there. Brock Schott is an interesting one, right? Just for what he stands for. He didn't play at Miami, but this was a really talented kid that chose Miami out of high school that was from Indiana. Who gets the first crack at him once he hits the portal? Indiana, right? That's where the value is. Josh Burnham comes over from Notre Dame. They've done a real, just in terms of elevating their profile. AJ Harris was a guy that I think a lot of people thought had the potential to be a top 100 pick at Penn State. He didn't have a great season. A lot of this in terms of roster building also comes down to how do you maximize distressed assets? And that's where AJ Harris would fit. That was a guy that has all the potential in the world. He's a former 5-star. He didn't play well this past season. Indiana's got a lot of confidence in their development, in their player development, obviously. Plug him in, see if you can get him right, and now you can get value back into that guy, and he can rebuild his draft stock. So Indiana's done a very, pointed job. I always talk about, brand awareness is so important for coaching staffs and front offices to understand where you fit on the food chain and the hierarchy. And Indiana now understands, coming off a national championship, that hey, we can go in head-to-head with the big boys now. We are now a destination spot. And, yeah, it was great to bring in these guys from JMU. We're going to continue to do our due diligence on that side of it. But if we can go get established players in our conference that we've scouted, we're going to do that as well. I think other teams that have stood out, like Will Stein in Kentucky, I was so excited about this hire because, just the offensive prowess, the guys that he had developed at the quarterback position. I think the biggest question mark I had was like, is this guy, going to have a little shot of the Dan Lanning in him? Is he going to be foaming at the mouth from like a talent ID standpoint? And the first thing they do is they ruffle some feathers and they flip Kenny Minchie from Nebraska. I love that move. And looking at the market, they had to have it, right? And then Lance Hurd, they get from Tennessee. They probably overpay for him, but I understand it. You got to do that at Kentucky. Tegra Shabola, they get from Ohio State. Distressed asset, Nick Anderson, who didn't play well, didn't fit the billing of one of the top-ranked portal guys last year for LSU. They bring him over. So they've done some really nice things, especially on the offensive line, getting that unit up to snuff and where it needs to be in the SEC. And they just feel like a team that it's like they know they kind of got to do things different. They have an understanding of where they need to overpay, and they have an understanding of where they can kind of find value. So Indiana, Kentucky, and then the other one I got to give, like, this one to me is like, okay, they only have 7 commits, but every guy they've taken, I love. Notre Dame. And this is a team that's got that quarterback on that timeline that everybody thinks is special. And you got that coach that you're talking about that's like, this is the year, right? So what do we need? Okay. They go out, they get Tion Gray from Oregon. This kid is 6'6", 330 pounds, nose tackle, redshirt freshman year. Played less than 250 snaps, but this dude has all the makings of a top 50 pick, right? Where do you get your beef from? That's hard. Quincy Porter, and then they also bring over Mylan Graham, 2 former 5-stars from Ohio State. Both those guys have a lot of ability that's unproven. They're giving CJ Carr the weapons that they need. Francis Braywu is another guy to add on the defensive line, and then they swing back and they grab Keon Keeley, who goes from playing in a 3-4 to now playing in an even front as, playing in a 3-point stance as a 5 technique, which I think should really breathe some more life into his career. And guess what? He showed up in the second half of the season, and they're getting him in a good spot. And then DJ McKinney, they get from Colorado, who needs to put it together. But, I mean, he's beautiful. 6'2", 180, fluid, can move, got everything you want. So I look at Notre Dame, and I'm like, hell yeah, I can see it. So those 3 teams to me definitely stand out for sure.
Is there a team that surprised you with when you sat down and kind of like look where all the chips fell? It was like, oh, this is like sneaky good. Like maybe not a team that is top 5, but like
Cal, Tosh Lupoy.
Yeah,
man.
let's go.
I mean, Lupoy's. I had a cup of coffee with him at Alabama. He's a total like maniacal recruiting psycho. He falls into that tree, and he played at Cal, but the job that they've done, man, and you think about like Jaron Chiave, Sagapula Tele, great story as a freshman. I think a year later, we could just be talking about him as like unanimous, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, right? If he takes that step, he's got that level of talent. What they're able to do, they bring in Chase Hendricks from Ohio, a guy that's super productive, had over 1,000-yard season. They bring in Ian Strong, big X receiver from Rutgers. They bring in some beef on the defensive line with Jericho Johnson, Kingston Lopa. Like Oregon's had a lot of guys leave, and Cal's kind of been the benefactor of just these traitsy guys that were depth pieces and have unmaterialized potential. And Tosh Lupoy is just saying, you can get on the field here, right? And Adam Muhammad, the running back from Washington, is a kid that I want to talk about a little bit because, he was in a situation where he was a number 2 back up there in Seattle, but I think this kid is legit. So Cal, to me, has always done a really good job in the portal, knowing the type of limitations that they've had. I think they brought Tosh Lupoy in there to kind of break through that glass ceiling, and they're doing that. Louisville and Arizona State would be the other 2 that are doing pretty good jobs as well.
Muhammad got a little bit of run. Like Coleman was banged up a little at the back end of the season, but because Coleman's a warrior, he was playing through it. But when Muhammad got in, I liked him. That's a good playmaker in the backfield for sure. Mm-hmm. So building out that Cal offense in a big way. What about sort of big picture trends? How, as you're sitting back and you're watching how things have changed and how things have shifted, if you were still, in 1-year-old positions, or if you got picked up as a consultant, if Cooper Petagna Consultants Inc., was contracted by a power conference school, what would be some of the messages that you would send to a personnel department about the way that things are changing right now in college football from what you're seeing with the transfer portal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about where you spend your money and knowing where the depth is in the market. And receiver, I look at it from like draftable grades, and I think that's something we haven't done a good enough job on, like educating what goes into the transfer portal formula in terms of, hey, there's a little bit of NFL projection, there's the projected production, there's the level of comp, there's the timeline of kind of the peak performance there. But understanding the depth of the market is very important in terms of the amount of money that you're spending, right? We talked about it with Jordan Seaton. But when you're trying to play money ball and understanding where you can get value, like receivers in an incredibly deep position, linebackers, very difficult to come by, right? Tight ends are also very difficult to come by. Running back is very scarce this year. The safety market has fluctuated from this year to last year. And then interior defensive line, big bodies are just very difficult to find. Somebody asked me the other day, is the portal just like swapping depth pieces? And I wouldn't say that. I would say that the trade route really is like above average starters. That's what you're seeing the majority of kind of what's being swapped. But also understanding value as well. It's like, I think we talk about production, but like Princewell Umanmi-Ellen was a really talented kid that we had ranked in the top 250 coming out. Goes to Nebraska, plays 203 snaps as a redshirt freshman or sophomore, has a sack and a half, and he's all like, when you're watching him on tape, his production versus the impact that he's having, even in those limited snaps, is whoa. And you're like, that guy's got boom potential. Goes to Ole Miss, has 9 sacks, has an all-conference year, and now he's the number 1 edge, right? Damon Wilson we had as a 5-star. Didn't play a ton, was a rotational piece, goes to Missouri, has a great year. If he came out this year, probably a round 2 pick. There's still part of that where I think people can get infatuated with either side of it. You can get infatuated with the potential, or you can get infatuated with the production. And the marriage is between the both. And I think understanding the variables that go into it, understanding why isn't, this guy's not playing, he doesn't have a lot of snaps. Well, who's he have in front of him? If he's if he's an edge defender at Georgia and he's behind Michael Williams and Gabe Harris and all these type of guys, maybe that tells a story a little bit, right? Or why is Tion Gray in the transfer portal? Well, he's behind, Barry Alexander, Amari Washington, and that's a very difficult lineup to crack, right? So I think digging deeper in the depth of all this, I think that's really important. And I wish I had more, but yeah.
That's the thing is, I don't think the average college football fan realizes how complex this gets in terms of trying to manage all of these moving pieces all at the same time, and really understanding something beyond 24/7 Sports does an excellent job with creating the score, but there's so much more context than just a class ranking, a class rating. And a lot of that I think has to do with the players that are already on the roster and sort of understanding what the value is going to be there.
My last point on this, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the roster goes from 85 to 105. And there's some of these schools you look at where the player doesn't match the brand. And you're kind of like, what is this? Why are they taking this guy? But, you're increasing the roster size by 23.5%. So, some of these guys that they end up taking that don't have a lot of production, that have played at either the FCS or D2 level, you just, you realize, hey, those guys are just kind of bodies serving a purpose for a different reason in that capacity. So last thing I will say, last year felt to me between LSU, which that obviously didn't materialize, Texas Tech, Miami, and Oregon. I looked at those 4 classes and was like, those 4 classes squarely put these guys in the CFP. And 3 out of the 4 made it there.
Yep.
And I look at these classes and I'm like, outside of LSU, which is just mass quantity and probably the best quality, I'm not looking at anything and saying like, yeah, definitively that puts you that's ratcheting you up a step, if that makes sense.
Like
right?
nobody
Like
leveled up. Nobody changed.
Yeah,
their,
it feels more like free agency. Like and I get it's free agency, but it feels more like NFL free agency where it feels supplemental, and not the foundational roster building piece. Really, outside of LSU, Penn State, Oklahoma State, that all went through coaching changes, right? So I think that's kind of the thing that sticks out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cooper, as always. You can follow him at Cooper Petagna on Twitter. He is college football expert for us here at CBS Sports, offering a lot of expertise for 24/7 as well. And you can follow him on Twitter at Cooper Petagna. You can follow him at Danny Kanell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip _Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
See y'all.
See ya.